well. And also, as I mentioned, that carryover, $18,140. And people that wonder about the America's Day at the Races show, as has been the case for the last number of years, from early in December until the beginning of April, we only do the show when Oakland's running, and we'll be on from 3 to 6 most days, but sometimes we'll have some longer shows on Saturdays. So obviously no Fox show on Thursdays. Don't think we'll have too many Wednesdays racing, thankfully. Race number 1. I don't have a lot to say here. Why don't you start out, Sarah? We'll get the Bix up there with the 5 MG Dash.
Yeah, this one debuted on the turf, ran at Finger Lakes going a route of ground and was bet that day, but then was let go at a bit of a price in his next start where I thought he ran very well, showing some good early speed in that race at Tampa, going the 5.5 furlongs when dropping in for a tag first time on the dirt. 42 Beyer speed figure kind of fits with what we've seen from this group for sure. And I like that he had that early foot and dueled with a 3-2 favorite in that race, who ultimately did nab him for third. But the top 2 finishers of that race, they got the setup and the trip, and they both stepped up in company, one of them on the turf. But they both ran very well in their next starts with similar numbers that, yes, there was a very slight regression in their Beyer speed figures, but with the step up in company, it didn't bother me too much. And I just like that this one showed some speed. Manny Franco gets on, and I imagined a similar type of trip for him.
Well, I'm not going to say anybody in this race has ever run very well in their careers, and we'll leave it open to whether or not they'll ever run very well again as things go. But given who's in this race, the 5 and 6 feel like the most logical horses, unless you want to try to get Rockable, who's dropping down further to get things going. And I don't disagree the 5 can win. It looks like speed. But I imagine that Real Lev will be right outside the horse with some speed as well. And I thought comes out of maybe a bit of a tougher field, claimed out of that race. Off Brittany Russell by Jeremiah Englehart, and I took this horse as the other horse that would probably be a slightly bigger price, and also the one who's currently 2-1. Rockable, I suppose, is possible. But like you, I just prefer horses that have a little bit more speed.
Yeah, I mean, he improved his early position in his second start versus his first one, but I just didn't like that he steadily backed out on a day where maybe being towards the inside was the place to be, and that's where he was.
All right. I thought it was a fair track last time, but I didn't think she did any running in that race. We'll see what happens. He did. Race number 2, well, it seems unlikely in race number 2 that one of the 1 or 6 aren't going to win this race, and we'll start with Sand Devil, who did get a perfect trip first time out. We'll take a look at it, and comes from a damn mineralogist who ran a number of years ago. Pretty nice horse, actually, the Bromans had. I want to say Kimmel trained that horse. Perfect trip or not, this horse really ran, and ran a lot faster than Smile and Say Cheese, and will be a heavy favorite today.
Yeah, I couldn't really poke any holes in this one. Yes, has to get the distance and has to break from the rail, but I thought sat close enough to be effective in this spot coming in, and just seemed to really draw away very comfortably and confidently under Jose Lascano in that start. So just has a faster race than what anyone has been capable of putting forth as of yet. The pedigree, as you mentioned, is there to stretch out in distance and handle the mile without any issue, and just seems like this one wasn't one that I could really make a case against.
Yeah, this horse also feels like the lone speed in this race and benefits from drawing inside. Just break and just go to the front is going to be very tough. But Smile and Say Cheese is now fully exposed. And I know our friend David Aragones had a thing for this horse for basically his entire career. And he was finally not rewarded at the windows, but rewarded in the sense that he did run very well last time out. And maybe he is a horse that you have a little more confidence, the Salamini and the experience will be more effective at a mile. And to be fair, he didn't run that badly behind some pretty good horses last time out. So I do think he's a reasonable rival to the favorite, and especially because it's easy to have more confidence in the mile for him. Like you, I prefer the 1, but I don't sneeze at Smile and Say Cheese, who's so clearly the other horse.
Yeah, I don't think he can be discounted. I think that he had a couple of starts in the funny side of the Bertram F. Bongard where it wasn't exactly enthusing regarding his debut, but he's gotten back to some of those numbers that showed that he's capable first time out with that 73 Beyer speed figure, and then he's been just facing good company. So I don't think that his race last time was bad at all, but it just seems like he's run enough that we sort of know who he is versus a horse that's already run faster than him.
No, I think an interesting thing with him is that he's a horse that was getting out badly in his second and third starts and subsequently ran poorly in those races. And if you sort of take them out and you realize he's been behaving better in his last 2 starts, his resume is pretty strong. You know, he's run well in all his races. He's improved a little bit from a Beyer scale. So I do think he has the credentials. And I think you can sort of make excuses for those 2 bad races because of his issues with getting out. And I think he's not impossible. And people do get seduced by the big figure first time out, and Sand Devil will be a heavy favorite. And I don't think he has to beat Smile and Say Cheese. We'll see what happens in race number 2. Race number 3, it's a big scratch, and the interesting thing about the scratch, and I actually saw a handicapper somewhere who picked Missouri, and I'm thinking,
That's interesting.
my gosh, I mean, if you weren't aware of the rail on December 22nd, you're Rip Van Winkle. If you're playing horses and you weren't aware of that rail. But with him scratched, I think it changes the dynamic of the race. And it probably really helps a horse like Neuschwanstein, who does project now to be the clear speed, but Warstride, and we'll start with Warstride here, and we'll take a look at him winning. I've got a race actually finishes second on December 9th of a year plus ago. What do you do with this drop down for George Weaver? And I think that's, the real question here, because George's numbers with drop downs are not particularly exciting.
No, and it's a very aggressive drop, I feel, for a horse that was running well over at Finger Lakes just 2 starts, or 1 start prior to this. That makes you think that he's one that has some early speed, can be competitive perhaps against a field that's a little bit better than the one that he's facing today. So I guess that last race, while it's still a number that's fast enough to compete, it wasn't quite as promising a finish. But this is a big drop in class for him. That
is it really? You're talking about a 5-year-old gelding, and they went to Finger Lakes to break his maiden and win a non-winners of 2 lifetime, okay? And he ran buyer figures in the 60s, which ain't getting him anywhere. So they took 1 shot, and my guess is it was probably more of an owner-type call. Take a shot at non-winners 1, it's fine. He didn't run terribly in there, but I think he made it pretty clear that he's not likely to be competitive. And I don't even think that was that strong in non-winners of 1. So I think realistically, if this is your horse and it's the Weaver barn, you look and think, well, what are we supposed to do with this horse? We're going to keep running him non-winners of 1 and get nothing? And maybe he's going well, and maybe we can drop him down and win a race and move on from him. And I don't think he's an absolute cinch to get claimed because, he may well get claimed because people are looking for sort of new merchandise. But take a look at him. This is a horse that was pretty good earlier. But this year, his figures say he probably should be running for $25,000 to $30,000. Because look at it this way. You claim him in this race. Where are you going next? He wins.
To a different circuit.
Where are you going? Yeah, he loses. Are you dropping him in for 16 in his next start? Because I think that the drop downs for Weaver are interesting. If you look at first time for tag at NYRA and overall, they're below 20%. Their ROIs are hovering around $1.20. If you look at non-maidens, they're a little bit better, but the ROIs are low because they're all short-priced horses and they're not delivering. They're winning at a mid-20s percentage, but they're not winning like 8 and 5 shots need to. So I don't think he's a great gamble, but I don't think this is that terrible a drop. I think this is a barn understanding where their horse belongs.
Yeah, I think just relative to the races that he's run on this circuit prior to that last one, the company that he was keeping in some of those maiden races. But at the same time, I see what you're saying about where he's been successful versus the field that he is facing here.
The hardest thing in this game, I think, for a lot of trainers, and I don't know the specifics here, I don't know any of the people involved, but it's sort of a trainer-owner situation. Owners may not want to drop. They're very fond of their horses, and a trainer has to eventually sort of say, okay, we've done what we could. We went to Finger Lakes. We won those races.
We did it your way.
We tried the non-winners of 1, and I'm not trying to blame the owner for this in any way. I don't know any of the story, but I think these things that happen.
It happens
And
sometimes.
also the barn says, we don't want to totally give up on him. We want to give him 1 chance. But then at some point, you've got to be realistic, and I think one of the problems people have is most of the time, or often, I should say, people get realistic when it's too late. And maybe this is the perfect time. You drop him, he can win, and the ideal situation is they win and a claim and a move on from him. But as far as Neuschwanstein, and we both have on top, I thought the horse ran fine last time and projects to be the speed, and I thought would be sitting second to Missouri, who wasn't going to win this race.
No, he wasn't, and I don't think he's ever going to run anything like the race that he ran last time ever again.
83s again for 2025.
I don't think any 80s
New Year's
or
prediction for Missouri.
Yeah, that's my New Year's serious bet there.
Should
that
stick
he
with
won't
that
be having
opinion.
again.
Just no more opinions the rest of the year, and I
Yeah,
think we'll be 1 for 1.
I think I will be. Yep,
good
absolutely.
call.
But he just looks like the horse that's going to be in front from the inside. And here he's been consistent. He's not exactly a winning type, but really who is in this spot. And
But that bothers me, the fact that he's not a winning type, because I agree with you.
Herd on the Street is in good form right now, so I
And
don't.
he got a perfect trip to beat him.
Right. So I think that overall, just getting a slight little bit of drop in price tag. He just seems like one who has races over his past 3 that are just consistent enough to win.
I agree with you completely. And you throw out the turf race, obviously. And, I see a lot of love for Good Reunion, and I'm not going to be shocked if he wins. We both got him somewhat in the mix, and I always respect Michelle Nevin. My problem with him was he got a very good trip last time out. I know he's a little bit wide, but there was a lot of pace in there, and the winner was inside of him. And, yeah, the winner got a slightly better trip, but the winner beat him fairly easily. And where is his fast race, right? He's got 170 buyer under sort of optimal circumstances. And so he's got to hope that both the 6 and the 2 don't run close to their better races or at their better races. And he maybe even improves a little bit because I just didn't see the race. I'm not saying he's impossible, but I don't know. He didn't do a lot for me.
I wanted to make some sort of excuse for him over the last 2 starts. Okay, maybe it's a little bit of time away.
Layoff,
but what happened last time? I know
he
that
didn't do any running.
He did nothing. I know he says he broke out a little bit. I don't think that that's any sort of consequential problem for him to do absolutely nothing at all in that spot. So
With a good trip, too, with a good setup, sitting behind a pace that ultimately fell apart a little bit.
I just don't think he's fast enough.
Yeah, I mean, not impossible, but prefer others. Race number 4, and we'll break after 4. Race number 4 was completely shredded. I don't know where Sarah was going, but I was
going the same
going to
place as
Busted
you.
Bay in the 7, burn again, and there goes going to come out. And it's going to become basically a 2-horse race in here as they're going to take the bulk of the play. And we'll start with Malu, who I have on top. I thought Malu ran fine last time, battling it out, never really giving up, and has clearly turned her career around. She's also going to be considerably more forward than the number 3 here, and there really isn't that much speed left in here. I think with the scratches, she is going to prove extremely hard to beat.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like that race 2 back sort of really came out of nowhere, but she backed it up in that last start. She was a short price, but she really battled all the way to the wire in that second start off a little bit of a break. So I think that 80 buyer speed figure has been proven to at least be one that she can close to replicate. Where I had my doubts about that, she proved me wrong completely. I agree that she's going to be forward in this spot. I just sort of wanted to take a horse that has those wins going back to back and a little bit more
back to back to back. We'll take a look at Olympics last race.
A little bit more of the ability to gradually step up in class. How long can she keep it going? I don't know. But I don't think she's going to be that far off of things early on, especially in what is now a very compact field.
No, obviously she's not going to be badly compromised, but I think her chief rival, who in my opinion may be a little bit better than she is, does have an advantage on her because she's going to run the race that she wants to run, whereas Elliptic has to make a little bit of an effort to get herself into slightly better position. I agree. She's obviously gotten very good for Bill Morey. There's no doubt about it. And her speed figures make her highly competitive with the 2. I just wish she was beating slightly better horses. I mean, Chasing Daylight, you and I could get in a horse suit. We could beat her. She's had so many chances. Backstretch, Rose, Pam Pam. These are horses that are just not as good as Malu and the races that Malu's been running. That worried me a little bit. I think she's finally getting a bit of a class test, though obviously that test is a lot less severe, potentially severe, because the 4 and 7 both came out of here.
Yeah, this was an interesting race. And then I think with scratches, it just becomes between those 2. And I would be very surprised if we saw someone else.
Right.
Get the
I mean, I think whether or not you like the 4 or 7 like you and I did, or either one of them, they were a little more interesting. They may have proven to be bad selections, but they were more interesting. Now you're very much dealing with an entry, with 2 horses that are going to just take all of the money in this race. In another situation like that, we'll take a break, and Sarah and I will be back with the late pick 4 after a quick break.
Horse racing? Check. Weekly promotions? Got 'em. Huge payouts? You bet. With NYRA Bets. Download the app today and bet on any track, anywhere, anytime with live HD horse races, betting tips and tutorials, expert picks, and more. You bet with NYRA Bets. Join now for a new member bonus at NYRABets.com.
Well, welcome back to Talking Horses. Sarah Bodwy and Andy Serling, race number 6, or 5, excuse me. We'll start out with the horse we have on top, Break the Fall. I'll let you talk about him, but he's just a horse that ran against better horses and ran bigger figs.
Precisely, and he is coming off of a little bit of a break, but he's just one that has been facing better horses. He has those better numbers, just as you mentioned. And when you're looking at Horacio de Paz off 180 plus days, dropping from maiden special weight to maiden claiming, yes, it's a small sample size, but it's something that he's done well.
Well, he's 2 for 5.
I got 3 for 8 off 180 plus maiden
Probably
special weight
looking
to
at
maiden
turf, too. Yes,
Probably.
I looked at dirt.
Yes.
But his numbers overall with maiden special maiden claimer, he's 7 for 28. When New York Breds, he's 6 for 20. He's done well with these. Listen, I don't think either one of us are in love with taking a horse. And, you
No,
know,
of
this
course
is
not.
another horse where it's not that dissimilar a conversation we had about the Weaver horse. This is a homebred for Barry Schwartz that's a 4-year-old gelding making his 3rd start off of an 8-month layoff. Where exactly is
60 buyers.
Horacio supposed to run him?
Right.
And if somebody claims him for 30 and they end up doing well with him, good luck to him.
Congratulations.
On the other
Right.
hand, he is off an 8-month layoff, and he's dropping precipitously. So to just ignore that and say it's not, because you could argue this one is a little worse than the other drop down.
Well, this one doesn't have as much speed either. So there is also that, and he's a
I'm
little...
not sure in this race he's not going to be forward. I don't know exactly who's going to be in front in
that's
this
fair.
race.
I think it'll be Maximus Monster probably, but this horse is just
Yeah.
better, so it seems, but who knows?
Right,
I mean,
Max's Monster can go, but I don't think he's very
don't think
good.
he's
Then there's a horse
affected.
like Solo Flight. We'll take a look at his last. I mean, he finally showed something in his last race. He had the couple of decent figs first time out in the slop at Finger Lakes, but he dropped down last time. And I actually thought he ran pretty well in the context of this race. But the problem I have is if he and Stormy Dreaming are sort of the chief competition to me, and I guess Burn Rubber, who we'll get to in a minute, I just think Break the Fall is the better horses, and I think that I'd rather take a drop down in Stormy's Dreaming in this race than take Solo Flight out of this race. I don't love this field.
no, I don't think there's anyone to really love in this field, and you know that I don't want to pick a horse that's just completely obvious, like Break the Fall in this spot, who's going to be a heavy favorite, and so much so the horse to beat on paper. But there's just nobody else that I could make a big case for that I think is going to beat him if he just shows up with any semblance of what he did prior.
It's reasonable. With Soul Flight also, as you mentioned, I thought December 12th was sort of an outside flow track. So I think though he made a wide move, he was very much with the flow of the track. And I guess Stormy's Dreaming, the other one, they're finally getting realistic and dropping him. But isn't he kind of a good example of that point? They're dropping him when he sort of can't run anymore. You know,
Right.
he
The
ran
time
well
was-
enough at Saratoga where he would have fit in a race
Sure.
like this. But his last 2 races, better horses or not, have been absolutely atrocious. But these drop downs do have a way of getting these horses to be more competitive.
Yeah, I mean, he's one that you can at least say he's doing something different and facing horses that are in a different world than the ones that he faced before, and that's not to go in a complimentary type of way. He just seems to have some issues getting out of the gate where he's getting bumped or get off a little
Yeah,
bit
yeah.
slow, and that bothers me a little bit.
Well,
but
I'm sure Eric will rush him into the race because that's what he does. It's a joke.
I would bet highly against that versus
He
Ryan
likes getting
Boisrois.
left. It gives him a good excuse to be last. Burn Rubber. I guess the reason I prefer the 4 and 6 to Burn Rubber, frankly, is this horse is coming out of maiden claiming races, and this horse has had its chances for Linda on the drop downs and just isn't very good.
I was a little disappointed last time
was
versus
bad.
the race that he ran 2 back. And I picked him last time, and he just didn't really do anything. He just kind of seemed like he was running in place.
Should they hustle him? Should they put him on ascend in here because he ran better when he had the lead?
But is there
and-
more pace in here?
Well,
Potentially.
there's no real pace in here.
sure.
I mean, I'm not saying I trust him. I'm just saying the way he ran better when he was in front,
Yeah.
maybe you want to be aggressive. And who do you really have to outrun? The 2 Maximus Monster, and maybe he goes. But I wonder if they'll just try to be more aggressive today because rating him just didn't work last time.
Exactly.
He did run so much better when they were aggressive. with
Yeah,
him.
I
We'll see
agree.
what happens. Race number 6. Well, I will say one thing about race number 6. With the scratch of Dad's Good Runner, this horse, Quick Hammer, we'll take a look at his last race, which is back in October. While I don't love this race in general, this is a horse that does get significantly helped by the scratch. he's going to, in all likelihood, be the main speed.
Yeah, I debated moving positions him and Air Show based on that scratch because he is going to be forward in this spot. I don't love that he's a horse that had a little bit of time off between July, the end of July to October, then ends up being avoided claim off of this win. I think that we've seen Devil's Key come back and not really run quite as well as he did in this start. I think that the field that he's facing in here, there are some horses that are rounding back into form versus him and the horses that he faced in that last start, but I agree. He's completely helped by the scratch and likely to be your main speed in this spot. But I think that the horse that we ultimately both ended up picking on top is not going to be too far off of him and is going to keep very close tabs on him and is just one that seemed to really take a step forward when switching over to Rob Atras and ran very well to finish second last time to Coffrey.
I agree. I felt like, Rob got him to take a step back forward to his better races going back, and it's probably a good sign. I agree with you that he's not going to be that badly compromised. I prefer the 4 was in here to help him a little bit, but I agree. I just sort of looked at it, and I think, like you, the 3, 6, and 7, it's pretty likely the winner comes out of those 3. And of the 3, I kind of thought Honorary Degree might be the one that's moving in the right direction. Not that I'm knocking the number 6 Air Show, but I don't love the race this horse is coming out of, but he's obviously not impossible. And unfortunately, it's not a race you can watch the replay of. There was obviously an incident in there, so the replay is not available. And that stayed inside. I don't know how bad the trouble was.
I don't think it was that bad. I remember watching that one live when we were showing it on America's Day at the races. I don't think that it was all that compromising for him. He's taken some time to get back to some better form, but his last race wasn't bad.
Yeah, his last race would make him tough, but he is a horse also that has less speed than the other 2.
Exactly.
So those 2 have a real advantage from a tactical standpoint. Race number 7 features maybe the biggest favorite of the day in the number 4, St. Benedict's Prep. This horse was so good that even Linda didn't scratch it. This is, I think, the last race when she lost to Movie Moxie, and I don't know, Sarah. I'm not going to take a shot. I'll put it this way. I ain't betting anybody against her. I considered Security Code, we'll get to in a moment, as a possible other horse, but this horse has really held her form for a long time, and I don't see any reason to try to beat this horse.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I agree, going to be the shortest price of the day in all likelihood. I couldn't make a case for somebody else. Just has the consistency and the tactical ability to sort of be on the lead, be just off, be able to face much better horses, and in all likelihood, as far as proven horses in her last couple of starts versus these, I just couldn't make a big case against her. I get that Rachel's Rock might be a little bit interesting based on the very aggressive ride that she got last time and now perhaps going back to some of the other tactics that she had been more successful with in the past, but I just didn't think that she was better.
Well, the problem is, to save a big, crazy figure that Simply Stated ran at Penn National, every race that Linda Rice has had her when she's kept the rider on board, 6 straight races, she's running figures that are just better than these horses. So you're hoping that she regresses and somebody else steps forward. Now, listen, she's a heavy favorite, and if somebody wants to bet against her, fine. But as far as Rachel's Rock, who you mentioned, we'll take a look at her beating Captain's Daughter, and I do want to talk about Captain's Daughter a little bit. She sort of did some meaningless running when this race was over and collapsing. The other problem I have with Rachel's Rock in this day was she got a very, very good trip.
She did.
To run this 83 buyer. And yes, she's obviously overmatched against Nick Style, and she's overmatched going mile in the Gopher Wand, and she didn't run that badly in either one of those races. But I think sort of even with ideal circumstances, she's just not as fast as St. Benedict's Prep. She doesn't have a pace advantage on her by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
So what exactly is going to happen other than hoping that the favorite doesn't run a race, which could always happen. It's horse racing, but I'm not going to bet horses saying, well, hopefully the favorite won't show up today.
I don't think that that's generally a good philosophy to have, because if there's no evidence to suggest, like, well, this horse may not run today and that's my only reason to think that somebody else is going to beat her, it's just not good enough for me to go with an alternative. Now, if it seems like there's a legitimate reason to think that, okay, but I just couldn't make the case for that to happen. It can always happen, but there's nothing that indicates to me that that's going to be the case.
I'd rather take a shot with Security Code to get better. And the problem is, she sort of taps out at 78 and 79 buyers, and no matter what she does, and she's sort of a remarkable horse in that her last race is one of the few bad races, and it's not unreasonable to say her form has tailed off a little bit. But she was still running fast enough races, and she's a pretty neat, consistent horse who seems to show up. So I thought she would be the second one. And if Rachel's Rock, if that's a super short exact, I could bet a 4-3 in here.
Yeah.
Try to get her for second. I have a bit of an affinity for her as well. Race number 8. Race number 8 is probably the most interesting race in the card, and
Yeah.
one of the few races where you can't narrow it down to 1 or 2 horses. And the morning line favorite is 3-1. So this is probably the most interesting race on today's card. And I'll start with the horse I picked on top. And I hate picking horses I bet on the time before. I'll never know how this horse paid 7-1 while I was away off the claim for Wayne Potts. But I'll tell you something. This horse showed renewed speed last time out and was a winner every step of the way. Now, you missed the boat at 7-1 last time out, and he's dropping the second off the claim, but he's already made his money with him, and if somebody wants to claim him, so be it. He can move on. But I don't know. He figures to be in a stalking position, and I just didn't really like anybody else, and I didn't think he'd be 8-5, so I ended up picking him, but without as much enthusiasm as last time when he was a big price.
Sure. I mean, I think the only slight concern is that he hasn't really run back-to-back races that are at that level lately, but that's
Different barn.
very small case to be made against him because it looks like he's going to sit a great stalking trip in here, or he can now show that he's been able to have just as much forward position as really anybody else in this
Well, I
spot.
think Winter's Ghost is going to go in here. You got to think they're going to employ the style they did 2 races back, and last time out he was caught behind Optic Way. He was much faster. So I think both he and Pipes and Drums are going to go. What do you do with Pipes and Drum, a horse you and I both have third off this huge drop down for Ray Handel? Interestingly enough, off the claim for Ray, he has only one horse, and that horse ran 7th, that he dropped down precipitously off the claim.
Really interesting. I looked at just first off the claim, stretching horses out, which is a good number, but that is something that's intriguing
My
to know.
worry with this
because-
horse is he's ex-Jacobson.
And he's just been dropping for a long time,
And now
hasn't
he's
he?
claimed for a quarter, and he's dropping for 10. He's an ex-Jacobson, and it just feels like Ray is waving the white flag. Now, he may win this race on the drop down, but and I'm not saying I'll be surprised if he wins, but he feels like he's a little bit dicey, especially as a morning line favorite.
And also thinking that he's going to be forward now, stretching back out in distance. Isn't he going to still have to deal with other horses that want to be forward here
Winter's
anyway?
Ghost is faster than him, and Silvera's going to go, as he always does.
Because
now,
the
I
night
suppose
isn't
these
super slow.
these two could hook up in here, see what happens. So what's the front man story?
I thought that he was the one in that last race, won by Optic Way, that was making up the most ground of the horses that ended up finishing in the top 3. Because Optic Way was just a horse that was really dropping off a cliff and finally got a situation where he was able to control and win convincingly. And Winter's Ghost, he was sort of sitting right in behind horses and waiting to make that move. But Frontman was the one that was towards the outside, making that wide, sustained bid. And I thought that there might be a little bit of speed in this race to help him out. He's going to be at least a little bit of a better price, but he just got beaten barely by Winter's Ghost, who I thought saved more ground than he did and had a little bit more forward position than him as well.
Right, except Winter's Ghost was forced to rate in that race, and he's really a horse that's much better forward. It's funny. I saw my friend Nick likes this horse as well. I didn't like him, but I guess there is some logic to that. I'm just not sure he's a dirt horse. He's got a funny pedigree. You know his second dam is, right?
I haven't looked. Who?
Zari.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm almost sure it is. I think this dam, if you look her up, she sold for like $800,000 or $1 million. I feel like she may have been a buyback.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Or the Lowe's buyer for like 800 or $1 million or something like that. Yeah, 'cause I think the Lowe's had her, right? Obviously,
yep.
they bred this
Yep.
horse, so they had her. Yeah.
Yeah.
But she's in
Interesting.
a Azari. Never, I don't think she ever really had that any foals that certainly were as good as she was. What about a horse like Venge? I was teasing our friend David Aragona and saying that, he's going to pick all these Ralph. He loves Ralph D'Alessandro.
Oh,
David
yeah?
is like Ralph's
Has he
biggest
switched from
fan.
Paul Chatterpaul to?
No. David has mad love for Ralph. He's his perennial winter favorite. He loves him. What about Because the Night? I'm not a huge fan. He doesn't really have the good races, but maybe he's a horse that just need a little time off. And I know he's coming out of conditional claiming races, and he's a non-winners of 3 lifetime that's running in an open claiming race. But these are pretty sharp outfit. I didn't think it was impossible, though I wonder if this is just a race needed off a layoff and the drop down. Maybe they're just sort of giving up.
Yeah, I thought he ran well 2 back. I think that his race last time, it's not necessarily how he runs his best races, where he was a little bit further back than I think that he truly wants to be. But ultimately, I was just looking, where is his race that is going to make him a major contender over some of the others in here who I thought might be slightly better prices? And he's a horse that likes to be forward. Well, if we think there's other speed in here, then
Well,
did I?
he rates. I mean, I don't know about that. I mean, his race 3 back was fine, right? He rated behind the pace there.
Yeah.
I don't think he needs the lead. I'm not. I don't like the fact that he's a $9 a 3 lifetime running against these. But I guess Jordan wants to drop him in for 10. He's finding a spot where he feels like maybe he can be competitive. That's today's card. Sarah, thank you so much. Thank you for watching. It's good to be back. Head over to NYRA Bets. Use the promo code BONUS200, and we'll match with $200 initial deposit. Much like Flavian, should we really have him up there for the winter? He's abandoned us for California, where it's much warmer.